Okay, so today let's take a look at our Smoke Vault by Camp Chef. This is a unit I've owned for a couple years now. I've done several different meats in it, used it a bunch of times. I've done brisket, I've done ribs, I've done fish, and then of course my favorite pork butt, which is what we're talking about today. Down south we call pork butt barbecue. So if you ever hear somebody ask if you want barbecue down south, what they're really talking about is pulled pork from Boston butt. That's what they mean. And like I said, this is a long-term review, and I've probably had this unit a little over 2 years now, and I've used it once every 2 or 3 weeks, probably 30 or 40 times now that I've used it. So it's been used, it's been abused. I figured it out, and so we're going to talk about it a little bit here. I have made a couple modifications to it. If you look down there at the bottom, you can see a little hose running to underneath my grill. I've actually modified this so that it uses a natural gas line. The natural gas line is essentially just a hose with a quick connect so that I can attach it underneath my grill there and then to the smoke vault. And they actually make that accommodation from Camp Chef. And they also advise you to get a number 51 drill bit, which is roughly a 16th. It's a little bit different in size. But the number 51 drill bit is to drill out the orifice in the valve that connects to the burner. And when you do that, it allows the right amount of natural gas in because natural gas doesn't burn quite as hot as propane does, so you need to make that just a little bit wider. Um, the smoke does tend to pour out of this thing, and so the other modification that I made was to put a smoke gasket around the edge of the door, which has helped, and I'll show you some views of that later. Right now we're in the dark because I'm doing this one the day of. Most of the time I smoke my porks start them the night before, take them out the next morning. This one I'm doing the day of, so here we are starting it at 4:30 in the morning today. But what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and take a look at our porks, take a look at how we do that, and then we'll come back out and get these things going on this Smoke Chef. Before we run back inside, let's take a look here quick at the exterior of our Smoke Chef. You can see the handle over there to the right, which is a lock handle on that solid steel door, which opens it. You can see the thermometer there in the center, which has worked very well for me, and I've checked it multiple times, and over the 2 years and 30 to 40 times I've used it, that temperature gauge has worked perfectly. As we look inside on the interior guts of this thing, you can see I use 2 racks for smoking my meat. That came with 3. I only used 2 for purposes of spacing. You can see the wood chips there then on the bottom and the water pan in the middle. At the lower level there, you can see the regulator with the built-in igniter for igniting the natural gas as you go. As these things are burning and going, I'll monitor it from inside the kitchen. You can see my windows right there where I go ahead and just kind of periodically look to make sure the thing is smoking. When it's not smoking, I replace the wood chips. That usually takes about every couple hours that I have to open it, replace the wood chips. When I do that, I inspect the water. If the water starts to get low, I add more water to it at that same time. That's kind of the way I monitor this thing. It's very simple, very slow. I usually smoke for about the first 6 hours of cooking when I'm doing overnight. Like today, where I'm doing all day, I'll probably keep it smoking pretty much the whole time. So now let's go back inside and let's take a look at these porks that we have and talk about them just a little bit before we get them on the grill. Okay, let's take a look at the rub we've put on these 2 porks. I use a 1:1:1 ratio of brown sugar, paprika, and McCormick's Sweet and Smoky rub. I like this one. I'm not particular to it. You can use any one you want. Some people put mustard on them first to help it stick better. I don't find that to be necessary. These 2 smaller porks right here I anticipate will cook a little bit quicker. This larger pork over here I anticipate will take a little bit longer. It's 8.5 pounds. It's typically what I would do for a pork. I would typically do 2 or 3 of those at a time to not waste the smoke because pork freezes really, really well. These 2 smaller ones right here, I anticipate that they will cook a little bit quicker, and since we're doing this the day of versus I usually start it the night before, I don't anticipate there being a problem then for having those 2 ready for dinner. Again, this larger one is more typical of what I would do, and I would do 2 or 3 of those for my family. Today, most all my family is coming. My 2 kids coming from college. I have my oldest daughter and her family coming, as well as my in-laws coming. So these 2 porks will serve us well. There'll be plenty for us to eat and plenty for us to freeze later, and it does freeze very, very well. One of the important things to note about these porks is that we've already trimmed the fat cap from them. And we do that before we put the rub on. The fat cap on a pork is not something you want. like it is when you do a brisket. A brisket, that fat cap is very, very important for helping render to the meat and keeping it nice and moist. With a pork, it gets in the way from the pork absorbing the smoke. It also gets in the way of the pork forming a nice bark. The bark is, again, very important to the flavor. It's this kind of dark outer coating that you get on the meat that gets a little crusty, and that's part of the reason I like to use a fair amount of brown sugar in my rub. I think it helps with the flavor of that. It makes it just a little bit sweet, which combines really nicely with the flavor of the smoke from the pork. It does start off as this orange kind of glaze when you first put the rub on, but very quickly it will turn into a nice mahogany color, and we'll see that as we are cooking our pork later on today. Now, what we want to do is go outside and let's go ahead and get these things on the smoker and get them going. All right, it's time to smoke some butts. One of the things I like about the Camp Chef really, really well is it's only been about 10 minutes since I started it. We're already really close to the temperature of 225 that we want. We've already got good smoke pouring out of this thing. It's hard to see in the dark lighting as we're starting this at 4:30 in the morning roughly, but I'll show that smoke to you here in just a little bit. Again, this thing contains really well. There's smoke pouring out. It's going to do exactly what we need it to do. We're going to get these butts loaded on it. I'm going to come in here a little bit closer and kind of show you on the dial here as best I can in this dim lighting, but those bold lines there are 200 and 250. We're a little closer to 200 than we are to 250, but we just started this thing, so I know I've got this setting. It's just right about at medium. That will keep me at 225 on this thing, which is right where I want to be. So I'm going to go ahead and get these butts loaded on there, and we're going to take it from there. Okay, it's just a little after 8:30. Our butts have been smoking for just a little over 4 hours now, and I want to point your attention to all that smoke pouring out of the smoke vault. Now, one of the things I told you about was one of the things I added was the gasket around the door. I'm going to show you that in just a second. Ordinarily, I would never do this because we've got such a perfect smoke going right now, and you can see it's kind of pouring out of the sides there and also coming out of the top, so it's circulating around the meat really well. If we zoom in here, you can see our temperature is holding really well, right between 200 and 250, and I have checked this thing out multiple times with my own thermometer. It's really accurate in terms of how it works. I'm going to open it up. I ordinarily would never do this. We're going to see a rush of smoke. You can see that rush of smoke. You can see how nice and mahogany that meat is turning. But then what I want to point out to you is around the edge right here. So this is gasket that I put all the way around the door. I did add that shortly after I first got it. I found that if you didn't add that gasket, that what happened was too much of the smoke just came out around the rim of that door. So you really do need to add that gasket with it. It's a few dollars to purchase the gasket, but it did make a huge difference. So at this point, we're going to let this go. Next time we'll check in on it. Will probably be either when we're ready to take it off, or if we think it needs it, when we go ahead and wrap it in foil to do that Texas crutch with it. Okay, so we just got 8 hours in here. I just checked all three of our pork roasts, all three of the Boston butts that we have in here, and one of them appears to have hit right at 203, right at 8 hours. Like I said, that's about the soonest you'll see it if you're holding between 225 and 250. Our temperature has creeped up just a little bit as time's gone on. We're just under 250 now, so I'm not surprised that it's done right here at 8 hours. I'm going to show you that. We're going to take a look. I'll back up. So this is what these guys look like when they're cooked. They look great. They're going to pull and be fantastic. And I'm going to show you here if I can. We're going to slide that guy in there, and we're going to watch that thermometer climb. So there it is, right between 201 and 205. That is the perfect temperature to pull this thing off and let it rest. Doesn't it look fantastic? So here it is on the foil, ready to wrap. And as you can see, it looks that perfect mahogany color. We're going to go ahead and get that taken care of, wrap it right up, and then drop it in the cooler, which helps preserve this thing for a really long time, as we're still a few hours away from ready to have dinner, and it'll keep this thing warm in the cooler with towels for hours and hours. So this is the pork that we took out first. It's been sitting in the foil and in the cooler for about the last 4 hours, and we're going to take this out and pull it now. And boy, I can smell the smoke already just as I open that up. I'm gonna open this here. And typically you pull these things, you know, they say the right way to pull pork is with your fingers. You definitely can pull pork with your fingers. This is kind of a piece of fatty pork that came off here, but you definitely can do this and pull it with your fingers. But the real thing you want to look for here is when it's done, this shoulder blade, you should just be able to pull out and pull everything off of it just like this. That should come off really clean like that. Now, once you've got it, the easiest way, again, you can do this by hand with fingers. That's okay, but this is still really hot even. It's been 4 hours, almost 5 hours since I took it off. It's time to pull it, and this is what it is. So the easier thing is to get yourself a set of these claws. And these claws just nice and separate. This was a gift I got several years ago for doing this. And we can see it'll pull really, really well when you're doing this. And gets it all kind of separated. If you see anything that looks like a little fatty that you don't want it, just toss it to the side. So here's our pork after we finished pulling it. You can see the mahogany color from the bark that's in there. You can also see the red areas of the meat where the smoke really penetrated it well and gave it a great flavor. In this instance, we're serving our pork today with coleslaw and baked beans, pretty traditional. Sometimes here in the South, we also put mac and cheese because we may not have known it, but that is a vegetable here in the South. It does count as your vegetable side. Today we're skipping the mac and cheese, and we do have a finishing sauce with it. The finishing sauce is vinegar based. This one has a little bit of a ketchup base to it, along with a combination of black pepper and red cayenne pepper to it, a little bit of brown sugar. Pretty traditional sauce in the South and goes very, very well, complements the pork very well. So you can see I prepared mine as a sandwich here today on plain white bun, which is the appropriate way to have it here in the South. You can also have it just plain by itself with a little bit of finishing sauce, which is my usual preferred method. I also want to close this out by saying that if you enjoyed this and enjoyed the review of the Camp Chef, which I think is a fantastic smoker with the natural gas hookup to it, because I never run out of natural gas hooked directly to my house, and you want to see anything else smoked, go ahead and leave a comment and let us know. And if it's something we've done or something we haven't done, we'll be happy to give it a try for you in the future.